I never forget where I remember that day very well. I was on vacation. We were down at the beach in Florida, and we were eating dinner at the Red Bar, and you called.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my son still talk about this. And so you told me what had just happened, and
Yeah.
you just kind of where we'd won with HKS for the Red Wings, and I
Yeah.
remember we had a huge celebration down there. I mean, it was
Yeah.
a big deal for us.
Welcome to SSR On Air. I'm Mike Rogers, your host for this monthly podcast brought to you by Smith Seckman Reed. Tune in as I interview leaders, colleagues, and clients about what is going on internally at SSR and in the larger engineering community. Okay, so thanks for coming in today, joining us here on SSR On Air. We got Scott Terry and Kevin Graham. And the sports nucleus here, for going back quite some years, and a lot of stories and things there. So we're going to spend a little time just talking about the sports market, SSR's presence in it, kind of the history of it a little bit. So I want to first talk about what you guys are doing now, because there's a little different roles and kind of multitasking a little bit. So Kevin, let's start out with what you're doing now, and what your role kind of looks like.
Sharing a lot of the tasks and duties really with Scott, but we basically lead the sports market sector for SSR, right? We're looking at all things sports and entertainment, I'll say. We've tried to gather in, several of those kind of tangential markets that really fit together with it as well, right? Be it convention centers or performing arts centers, or maybe even down to hospitality and hotels and things like that. But really, really our main focus is to take the market, understand the market, grow the market, and position really SSR, put us in a position of success, right? Where we can hopefully win more work, do more work, and I guess have some fun along the way, I guess, as well.
So, fun, yeah.
But that's what my main focus really now. Of course, I get down in the weeds too. I manage projects and still love to do design. I guess I always love to do design as well. I love to get down in the weeds occasionally as well when I need to. But really, my main focus is really like working the sports market, positioning ourselves to really grow and win, I guess is what I guess I would consider my main focus right now.
Yeah.
So,
Scott, what about you? What you got going on?
Yeah, so in February I took on a new role as operations director for Dallas and Fort Worth, and moved my family out to Dallas. And looking at it now, being in it about 5 months, it's given me a different perspective on SSR and in the sports market. It's allowed me to broaden my approach to developing projects and developing relationships with clients, but then also to kind of bring the operational piece to the table as well, and try to help kind of bridge that gap on how we can execute and accomplish getting the work done. And I think the other perspective of stepping into a market like Dallas, where it's primarily healthcare, it's given me some different perspectives on how to balance that with the sports work, and also vice versa, how to bring our expertise coming from sports and entertainment into the healthcare sector, just to give some different balance to how we're accustomed to doing things.
Yeah, some best practices there as you share knowledge back and forth a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
And in making this move, I think it's also opened the door for us to to potentially broaden our market, and for me, really look to recruit the best talent to multiple locations, and really grow our practice, from the good foundation that we've got, but then also to really get creative on how we bring other people to the table that can learn and become experts at this type of work.
Yeah. So you have something there to
Yeah, I
add
was
to
just
it?
going to say, I think this is kind of what we've wanted for sports for a long time, right? Is to really, it's all been, the nucleus has been here in Nashville, but to see it kind of expand into other markets like Dallas. Been successful in Atlanta recently with Seth Spangler and some work down there sports-wise, and chasing a couple of projects out of Sarasota as well. And to see sports really start to kind of, start to reach out of Nashville and really kind of get into some of our other locations as well, to me has been kind of a nice success story, and something I think we've all three have wanted for a while.
Sure. Yeah. So it's interesting. I want to turn the tables back a ways and talk about how we got into the sports world a little bit. So And Kevin, you were actually here at the very beginning of it. I came in maybe a couple of years into it, 2 or 3 years into it. So, talk a little bit about how we did this, because in my mind, I mean, you look at it. I mean, this is a national practice, recognized national practice, which beyond healthcare, we really didn't have any national practices at that point. And all of a sudden, you look back. I mean, it's been 20-something years, but you look back and we've got significant sports projects that we can point to, the big sexies as they call them. We've got some of those that are really interesting. So to talk about the early beginning.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, sports is what brought me to SSR. I mean, I'm here because of the sports work. Specifically, it was when Bridgestone Arena, then it was Nashville Arena. And I had graduated from Vanderbilt in 1993 and didn't know what I was going to do exactly out of college. And ended up seeing an article in the Tennessean. Back then, everybody read the newspaper, and everything's now digital. But looking at the newspaper, and they had a little bar chart in there on construction of this new arena in Nashville. I had like a little bar chart. It was just barely getting started. And one of the project managers on that was a guy named Bill Stockard with Hartfield and Roberts. And of course, we all know HOK was a sports architect, but Hartfield and Roberts was the local architect, kind of the local architect. I'm not sure they were architect of record, but they were the local architect, a partner to HOK Sport back then, now Populous. But I basically contacted him and said, hey, I'd love to work on sports projects, and I got this degree from Vanderbilt. And he said, I'm going to kind of send your resume over to Rob Barrick at SSR. He said, expect a call from him. And I got a call from Rob, and kind of all history from there. I interviewed and ended up being hired, and lo and behold, a few months later, I was working on part of the Nashville Arena. It was already kind of in construction at the time. Project number for Nashville Arena was 93660. I still remember that.
So
Those stick in your head.
93 project
so
number.
They won it in 93, and of course the story of how they won it, Mike, and you know some of this, but our very first sports project, Kenny Deal, of course the infamous Kenny Deal, to win the project, they did this video where he was crawling down West End.
That's right.
And they would tape him at certain little points down, all the way down from SSR was on West End at the time, 3319 West End.
Right.
And so he crawled from the office, and of course Bridgestone's on the other end of Broadway, the other end of Preston. He literally crawled. Theoretically speaking, but they would video him at little clips, and they sent that video to HOK, basically saying, I'm willing to crawl to win this project. And that video is still around somewhere, I think. But anyway, so that's how we won the project. Kenny and them had reeled it in, and then I got to work on it, and that was sports project 1 for SSR, right? And it's all kind of grown from that point. So.
Yeah, and that arena was the first of its kind.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it was the first of the new generation of arenas, and it's
true.
still. I had this conversation with some folks with the Predators the other day. It is still iconic in a way, and it still works. I mean, it's aged now, but the bones are still good. It's really interesting that we were part of that first of this generation.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it was, and I was just in a meeting last week on another new project here in Nashville we're working on, and they were talking about the acoustics in the new building we're going to be working on, and they said that Bridgestone's still the #1 rated acoustical arena in the country, till to this day, and it's been tuned for acoustics, right? Because it was kind of at that time it was a concerts first building.
There was
right?
no hockey.
There was no hockey. There was no Predators,
hockey
right?
inside,
There was no hockey team at all.
The Knights played in it originally, remember?
Just for a little while, but there was no Predators.
Yeah.
It was kind of it was a let's build it, they will come sort of scenario.
Yeah.
But it was built concert first. And so it's always been a premier concert venue, and then of course we got the Predators, and we did all that work too. So
it's still top. I think it's top 3 still. 150 events scheduled this year.
Yeah.
So that's a lot for an arena. It's a lot of turnaround.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of projects that happened and occurred early on. And this guy, talk about a little bit when you came in the door. What was going on at that point, and when was that?
Yeah. So when I graduated, I played sports all through growing up, and I played baseball through college, and I really didn't have any idea what I wanted to do when I graduated.
Like a lot of us,
right? But I knew I had an engineering degree, and I really had a passion for sports, and I was looking across all these different jobs that I just had no direction on, and I can clearly remember responding to a career builder ad for SSR and thinking, I really don't fit the job description, but I'll give it a shot. And I remember coming here and meeting you and Lenny Thomas and sitting down, and you all started to show me some drawings and show me like, well, we do sports work here. And at the time, you guys were working on University of Central Florida Arena, and then also the soccer stadium over in Colorado, over in Denver.
The Rockies, yeah.
Yeah. And so I wish I had a picture of what my face looked like when you all started to tell me about
Your
this
eyes got this
opportunity,
big
because I
and
was
you're-
like,
That's awesome.
sign me up. I'm
Yeah.
ready to go. And I guess the rest is history. Once I got a taste of that, it just really, for me, solidified just being able to put the engineering side and the sports side together in something that I just had a lot of passion and energy behind.
Yeah, that's a good story. Yeah, so when I came in, I really came in as a project manager first and managed some work, and it was the Purdue Stadium project and some of the speedways we were working on, and we were doing prisons at the time, right?
Yep.
So it was back during the team structure. So we had this, for some of our listeners here that remember, we had 35 teams or so. We were very, very fractured, and we kind of were. You had to feed yourself. It was go out and kill it and do the work yourself. And we've evolved a lot since then, and it's a little different makeup now. But we've done some great projects over the years, and there's two things that I'll ask. What's your most memorable project, and what's your most memorable character that you worked with on a project? Because the characters in the sports world, I think, not that they're completely unique, but they're very animated, I guess, or bigger than life sometimes,
Very
true. And so we tend to work with and around some people that are pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely
So
true.
projects and people.
So people, I'll go people first, and Kevin and I probably have a shared experience on this one.
Yeah.
So years ago, when I'll give it from my perspective first, and then Kevin may take it back a few years, but when we were working on the Chase Center in San Francisco, Kevin and David Carlock, who worked for Machete, would talk to us about this guy named Richie, and they would describe Richie and what he would dress up with, how he would dress and what he would wear to meetings. And they would say, yeah, he might wear these real funky sunglasses with a basketball jersey and some long board shorts and some flip-flops or some like Air Jordans. And I was like, you guys are making this up, right? And I will never forget the first time I saw Richie in person, because I was sitting in a meeting in San Francisco, and it was a all glass conference room, and I see this guy come in with his hat on backwards, sunglasses, and I was like, who let this guy in? And the closer he got, I realized that's Richie.
That's Richie.
And I think I looked over at Kevin just wide-eyed, and I was like, do you see that? And Kevin just started laughing.
That's what, like, yeah, I've known Richie for a long time. So,
Yeah.
yeah, Richie's a character.
Yeah.
First time I ever met Richie was back on the Toyota Center, and that was just the Houston Arena.
Oh yeah.
And he was doing some interior work for Carlock there on the interiors. And of course, by then he had graduated to his basketball phase, kind of with his hat on backwards and his jersey. But back then he showed up to 2 meetings with a top hat and a coat with tails and shorts. And his assistant came in with a full sequin gown. And that's a true story. And both those meetings, and so Richie's been well known throughout the sports kind of. He does more interiors is what Richie really concentrates on, kind of retail and interiors. But Richie, he was very well known in that part of the world. But yeah, so Richie's definitely I would agree, Scott. Of all the characters, nobody beats Richie for sure. So no doubt about it.
That's good.
So yeah.
So what about a project? What's your not your favorite, because every project is has unique, and I think we have a lot of favorites maybe, but what's the one that you remember when somebody asks you right off the top of your head, the one that comes out, it rolls off your tongue first, something you worked on?
I'll go. Obviously finishing up Allegiant, there's lots of great stories, and it's a great success story for all of us, and first NFL stadium. But really for me, I guess if I have to pick a favorite, it would go back to in Houston for the Rockets when we did the arena. For me, it was the first one I really kind of kind of led the design on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, sure there were other people around me, but I was kind of the lead. You know, and in all the meetings, and I'll never forget trying to open the building up. You know, it's like always that sprint at the end to get the building open just before, you know, it's going to open. And we were 2 days before the opening event trying to get the TCO, and I remember I was like at midnight or 1 a.m. up on the catwalk, them trying to get the smoke fans started and get the whole fire alarm smoke system worked out. It literally was like 1 in the morning. We were up there and finally got the fans started up, and first time they started to, you know, like move air. And we're only 2 days out from the event. They hadn't even fired them up yet.
Wow.
And so so that was I learned a lot as a fairly young engineer at the time, and I mean, still so memorable and fresh in my mind. I remember even then, after we got done that night, I had to go and like they asked me to stay an extra day, and I didn't even prepare for that. But I had to stay, and so I remember I went and bought some clothes and stuff, literally, because I didn't have enough stuff even close to with me to even, you know, be there. I was super dirty where we were like working like most of the night. So I guess that's one of my most, from a personal perspective, probably the most memorable. Yeah.
Well, that was a significant project in a lot of ways. I mean, we had done some projects, but that one was just different. It was impactful and kind of turned the ship or accelerated the ship for us a bit. That particular project did. Yeah. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, for me, I would say there are several, but one that I think sticks out as kind of having the most memorable moments and kind of the biggest impact to my life would be Chase Center.
Yeah.
Just because I remember when Kevin and I started that project, and they started to kind of shift and delay it a bit, and it was like it would shift out a season, and then it shifted out a second season, and we studied that building being on a pier out in the San Francisco Bay, and you know, thinking back across just the complexity of the project and everything that was going on, I felt like the synergy of that team was so strong that even through the toughest times, we figured out how to find good solutions and figured out how to get through the just challenges of something where you're bringing together, you know, an arena and 2 office towers and, you know, a ton of mixed-use retail and
on the West Coast.
And right on the West Coast. And
and
what's cool for me to look back at that project is when I started that project, I was not married, no children, and there were a lot of people on the team that were in that same boat.
Yeah.
And when we finished that project, I was married with 2
kids.
boys.
Right.
And so there was a lot of life that was lived kind of within the 7 years that we worked on that.
Yeah, and that's something to think about. I mean, we work on these things 5-7 years. I mean, it's pretty common. You know, one of the. I mean, I love a lot of our sports projects. One of the most memorable moments for me though was actually a win, not necessarily the project. And for me, it was, if you guys remember back in the day when we were chasing the Red Wings project.
Yeah, I remember this.
Right, and the well was pretty dry heading up to that point. We you know, it was a downturn in the economy, things were really lean, and we had been trying to make up, because it had been years since we had done work with HKS, and we were trying to mend that relationship. And when the word came in that we won that project, at the time HKS had it, we won it with HKS. That's just a day that I won't forget, right? I mean, it's just kind of one of those moments where like, man, we made it happen. Somehow we made it happen. And this is the Detroit Red Wings, for crying out loud. This is not, you know, some podunk team. This is one of the 6, one of the first 6. You know, I mean, it was significant for me, and it had an impact on me.
Yeah, I never forget where I remember that day very well. I was on vacation. We were down at the beach in Florida, and we were eating dinner at the Red Bar. And you called. And me and my son still talk about this. And so you told me what had just happened, and you just kind of where we'd won with HKS for the Red Wings. And I remember we had a huge celebration down there. I mean, it was a big deal for us right there because we hadn't won, and we really hadn't won anything big with HKS either.
No.
And you know, Mike, you'd been working them for a long time.
Years in the making.
I mean, a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Man, what a win that was. That was great.
It was.
I mean, I remember that. I remember where I was sitting when you called. I remember it very vividly.
Yeah,
that was a big deal.
Yeah, it was.
Yep.
So we had ice cream in the break room, and I think I fell on my knees. Thank the Lord.
That was huge. That was huge.
It was a great project. So, and it was a fun project to work on. I mean, the same thing. It went on for a long time, and ended up changing architects over time, and
sure
became something completely different. But good project. So, So as far as the market goes and where it's going, I think in my mind, and I think in a lot of people's mind, people see these big sports projects, and we've had this conversation over the years. Man, this can't keep going. How can sports is bound to dry up at some point, and we've said that through every recession over the last 20 years that would be the case, and it literally has never been the case.
Right.
And so there is a disconnect between the economy in some ways in these sports projects. I don't think it's completely disconnected, but there is a disconnect. So how do you guys feel about it going forward? There are a lot of things on the block right now. There are a lot of things that are in front of us, potential wins or wins that we have, everything but booked. So how do you guys feel about that? Concerns?
Sports market has been shockingly robust, I guess, coming out of the pandemic. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand, from ownership and a lot of our clients. It's hard to really put your finger on what the demand was going to be. But, really we're in a cycle right now where a lot of buildings that were built in, let's say, mid to late 90s, even early 2000s already, right? A couple of these buildings are already being replaced, if not replaced, major renovations.
Yeah.
Because, face it, you got to draw people out of their houses, right? You got a nice big screen, high quality television on the wall. You can drink your own drinks, eat your own food, not have to deal with parking or whatever. Have a great experience like you're in the front row. The camera angles are all over the place. What's going to draw you out of your seat, right, at home and get you to go to an arena or stadium or ballpark, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, it means our clients have to create experiences that are better than home. So if they got to create an experience better than home, well, they got to step the bar up. Going to a arena or ballpark and eating, popcorn and a basic hot dog and maybe grabbing a beer, those things. Sitting in some seat that's not wide enough, or you have no interactivity. You have trouble getting a signal on your phone because the Wi-Fi and DAS are not up to date. People are just not going to put up with that, right? Especially with the price that people are expected to pay for these experiences. So personally, I think people still want to get out. They still want to, get out of their houses, especially after the pandemic. Travel's booming, which is unbelievable with the prices of things. But I really think the market is going to be pretty solid, because I think that people, the buildings that we work in, have to stay current and relevant, right? So, I think the sports market's good. We're well positioned in it too. We've had a lot of successes. And I think SSR's position is very strong right now in the sports market. There's really many jobs out there we don't at least get a chance at, right? At least to get a proposal in, which is, a long way from where we used to be. Yeah. So I don't know about you, Scott, how you feel about it, but
yeah, you kind of nailed it on the fan experience and the pursuit of that experience, and I think it fundamentally goes back to this idea of community. And
that's a good point.
People like to show up and cheer for something that they believe in, and they want to be part of that. They want to be part of that team. And you think about the Stanley Cup playoffs that just happened with the Avalanche and the Lightning. The Lightning down in Tampa Bay had an event where they had 3D, I think they used 3D technology to project onto the ice the game that was happening in Denver. And fans showed up and were part of that as an event, and that was an away game for their team.
Right.
And I think that's just a great indicator of why people why the fans show up. And I think that community, that idea of cheering for something as together and being part of something. I think our architect and owner clients, that they are chasing and pursuing that passion, and I think when you base it on that, you drive towards just the evolution of what the industry will always become, because it's kind of chasing that pursuit.
And it changes the facilities. It changes the way they approach things and the way they look and feel, and the amenities they offer, and I think too a lot of it has to do with the level of sales, right? Some of these facilities now have 30 different level of sales, tickets, pricing and things that they can put together, where in the past it was one or two.
Right.
You had a suite, you had a seat in the bowl. That was it. So big part of it. You talked about that 3D event. A lot of augmented reality is out there too, where right you're holding up your phone and you're watching the game or you're watching something, and they're augmenting that view with other things that are going on within the scene. It's pretty cool, and they're mining that a lot too to play into it.
Yeah.
So, and I think they're getting it, and I think you're right. I think you're both right. That's the idea, and I think it'll keep evolving the facilities. It's just amazing how much, obviously, they're costing now.
Right.
I mean, we had this conversation about the cost of Allegiant versus the cost of that stadium built today, which it's only been open for 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. Not even quite 2 years yet, but almost 2 years. And so it's been open for 2 years, and the cost of it today is twice what it would be then when they started it. So it's pretty steep.
Yeah.
It's pretty steep.
Yeah.
So that's where it's heading. And then the funding, how these things funded has changed dramatically over the years. Back when we first started this, there were a whole lot of cities willing to just write the check to get the teams to come, and that's not the case anymore. I mean, it's public money's a little tougher to come by. It's not impossible because cities still see the advantage of these things coming in, but there's more of a sharing, a public-private partnership kind of sharing, and
Definitely.
And what's interesting about it too, I think, is what drives the real money is not necessarily the stadium or the arena. It's the things that are around it, right? It's all that development around
Absolutely.
it. It's kind of like what they're talking about here in Nashville with the Titans and the stadiums here, and then you've got a 60-acre development around it that is retail and things that are going to generate money for tax revenues and other things. So that's changed a lot over the years.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming in and spending some time on the podcast, and it's great to see you. Scott traveling in from Dallas.
Yeah. It's good to all three to be together.
Yeah.
Face to face.
Yeah,
It doesn't happen a lot anymore.
It is
So,
good. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of SSR On Air. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You can also connect with us on social media. Links to everything can be found in the show's notes. Take care, everyone. See you next time.